Hey everyone, this is Megan
and Darla. We are your hosts of the Enlighten Benefits podcast.
Our goal is to help you understand all things insurance. In each episode, we will tackle the confusing topics and terminology as it relates to insurance.
We want to create confidence over confusion and make insurance suck less.
We hope you enjoy our show. Hey Darla.
Hey Megan.
How are you?
I'm good.
Got your coffee ready for our convo?
Hey, I've had my granola bar and my coffee, and yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So today we have a special guest in the studio. Welcome, Bryce.
Thank you all. Happy to be here.
Sure. Bryce, will you tell our audience who you are and why you're here today?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Bryce Malloy. I specialize in the under 100 market for ancillary benefits, so life, disability, dental, vision, and I work for a carrier called Unum.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We've talked about this for a while.
I know. Welcome. All right. So what do you want to talk about first? Dental
Sure.
insurance?
Yeah, let's take it away.
Ask away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So tell us, if someone is wanting to get dental insurance, tell us what are some things for them to look for in a carrier?
In a carrier, contractual strength is typically the first thing, right? And I can break that down a little bit, but specifically speaking, you just kind of really need to look at what your specific needs are, right? Do you have kids? If so, you probably need child orthodontia. Do you have a good history of dental health? Do you go to the dentist a lot? Do you have a family dentist that you go to regularly? Just kind of breaking it down by individual need, right? If you go to the dentist regularly and you have an in-network dentist that you've gone to forever, you don't really need to shell out for that higher, more robust PPO plan that covers both in and out networks. If you do have kids that are under 26 years old, you should probably look at an orthodontial plan. And then just your overall network strength is probably a big thing. That's usually where we see most issues or questions come up is this dentist in network and how do I avoid paying additional out-of-pocket costs?
Okay. So would you say that's probably the biggest thing is we want to make sure that our dentist is in network? And then subsequently, if we call our dentist and we say, hey, I'll just use Unum, for example. Yeah. Hey, are you in network with Unum Dental? And they say no. Is that like we should then tell contact our employer and say, oh, we have a bad dental plan? Or what's your suggestion at that point?
Yeah, so there's reporting that you can pull on the front end to avoid a lot of that.
Okay.
They're called disruption reports, and a lot of providers, or rather employers, can just send you a list of the dentists that their employees utilize. But your safest bet is probably to go to the carrier themselves and have that specific dentist name. Some carriers contract through different dental networks. And so if you call and say Unum Dental, well, our network's called the Always Care Network. So sometimes there's some confusion and they say, hey, they're not network, but we might actually be. So most carriers actually on their website have provider searches where you can go in and put the name of your dentist, the location, and it'll tell you whether or not they're in network.
Perfect. That's what I was getting at. I was hoping you would say, because there is some confusion around networks sometimes.
Totally.
Sometimes, if we say, oh, we have Blue Cross and Blue Shield Dental, the dentist is just a little confused. So it is important to know the network, but then at the same time, I don't feel like that the consumers really know the network. You know
Totally.
what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's just say go aheed.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just, when I have a thought,
you got to get it out.
I just have to get it out. You were saying network, and, one of the scary things for consumers, I know that you kind of have to speak insurance. So, and most of us don't. But if you walk into that dental office and you want to get your teeth cleaned and you go up to the receptionist or the person at the front and you say, do you take Unum? They're going to say yes 99% of the time because they'll take anything.
Right.
The big question, I think you'll agree, Bryce, is Unum in network? And nobody really knows how to word that correctly because everyone will take whatever card you give them. It's just a matter of whether it's a network or not. So, and most people don't know how to ask or phrase that question. And it's kind of a loaded question, unfortunately.
You're absolutely right. I think that's a great point for our consumers. That's what we're here for. What questions do we ask? I think that's a great point is instead of saying, do you take, instead rephrase your question to say, is this provider in network with. And just because the provider maybe your dentist says, no, we're not in network. Okay, go ahead and run it through my insurance anyway. Totally. Bryce, would you think that we've talked about this before? Mm-hmm. You can always ask your dentist to run their plan of attack or their, whatever dental plan that they, you have in place, run it with your insurance to, what is that called?
The predetermination.
Predetermination. Thank you. Yeah. So what does that look like and how is that best for our consumers to utilize?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is definitely something that I would heavily encourage any individual that's going to use or get major dental work to do.
Okay.
It's basically a pre-quote that then you can take back to your dental provider and say, hey, here's what I'm scheduled to get. What will you cover and what won't you?
Okay.
Sometimes the issue that people run into is there can be a miscommunication between what's medically necessary and what's not. And oftentimes that differentiates whether or not people get stuck holding that entire bag.
So I think, would it be safe to say though, that it's not, we're not talking about cleanings?
Correct.
I mean, yeah. That's kind of a pretty much of a no-brainer. But when you said that, Bryce, and I know that you and I have gone through this before with a client, and unfortunately, that client can get stuck in the middle.
Totally.
I feel like, as an example, just to kind of make things a little easier to understand, we had a mutual client between Unum and Enlighten Benefits. A girl had gone to a dentist, did not do predetermination. The dentist went in and wanted to do all of this work. And he actually stated in his report that she had severe bone loss.
Right.
I know you remember this case.
I totally do.
We went back and forth. And so I was advocating for the client. Megan and I try to put ourselves in the middle to be the advocate, but Unum was having a problem with saying that they were going to pay because whenever their people looked at it and their dentist that they have on call said she did not have bone loss. And and then the dentist said she did have bone loss. So, and then I feel bad because the client's stuck in the middle. But all in all, if a predetermination letter would have been sent, that's going to keep that client from getting stuck in the middle from, well, the dentist said this, but the insurance company said this. And then they just feel like an insurance company is going in and finding some little tweak that they don't have to pay. And that's how insurance companies always get a bad rap. It's totally. Because it falls back on you to say, well, you're not paying, when possibly it could be the dentist's fault because he recommended something that may not have been necessary. So I can't stress to you enough, whenever the dentist says that you need something major, that predetermination letter is make it or break. I mean, that I just feel like that's so important.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think the big thing here is just try to remove the client from the middle. And that's why they have people like y'all to help and advocate for them. But they're not going to know the terminology. They're not going to know where to push back. And that's often something that comes up across the board with carriers is they have their own in-house consultants and retired dentists that will look at that and review it and basically, make a call based on whether or not we'll cover that.
Yes.
Now, to the predetermination of benefits aspect, that is totally something you can do on the front end, right? Remove that. And then there's that conversation between the carrier and the dentist, and they can hash that out however they see fit. But anytime the client's stuck in the middle, one, it's a bad day for them. And, why do you have benefits if it's not going to work type deal?
And the work's already been done.
Right. Oftentimes that's the case.
Yeah.
And we do find that, and this is, not to bash any dentists in any way, shape or form. At the end of the day, they are trying to do their job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And get covered procedures. And us as an insurance company, we have to protect our risk. And so there's this, somewhat battle back and forth. Any carrier is going to go through that. But I do think that anything that's non-preventative needs to go through that predetermination of benefits, simply because almost every single carrier or the vast majority of dental plans will cover preventative stuff at 100% regardless.
Right.
And so if you're just doing a generic cleaning or something, that's really a moot point. However, if you're going for surgery or tooth removal, or you have something like bone loss, it's crucial to get that done on the front end. And quite frankly, it's educational from the employee standpoint because it also holds the dentist accountable for not doing unnecessary work and charging them for things that aren't necessarily needed. In that specific instance, I don't know how that shook out. However, none of us can look at an x-ray and say, hey,
right.
There's bone loss, significant whether it is or not. So I would encourage everyone to educate themselves and just be 100% certain before you even go under the knife. Because if you are going to go get a giant procedure like that and you don't necessarily need it, well, that's taxing on a lot of facets of life, right? Like you have to pay out of pocket as well as undergo surgery.
The pain and recovery and everything from that procedure.
Totally.
Another thing that I had learned is some carriers have a missing tooth clause in their dental benefits, and then other carriers, meaning dental insurance companies, don't have that. Correct. Could you enlighten us on the missing tooth clause and what that means and help us understand that terminology?
Yeah, absolutely. So most carriers, not most, but it's pretty much 50-50 now I see from the contracts that I review. But it's basically to protect insurance carriers from adverse selection, right? If you have a missing tooth and you need it replaced, you're likely going to elect dental benefits and come on and try to immediately get that fixed. So it's somewhat of a pre-existing condition exclusion. So a lot of carriers will require someone to be on the plan for a specific amount of time before they'll cover a missing tooth. Standardly, you see 20 to 36 months, so 2 to 3 years where you're going to have to go without that tooth. Now, if you have a carrier that contractually does not have a missing tooth clause, you can come onto that plan with 3 or 4 missing teeth and get them immediately covered.
Okay.
So I guess, not all plan is created equal, but that's definitely something to be aware of, because if you are electing coverage, you go and expect to have something covered, and that's the only reason you elected coverage.
Yeah. You don't want to be disappointed.
Right. Exactly.
And there is also a difference between individual dental and coverage or dental coverage through your employer.
Correct.
Because I know I've ran across it too, where if you have an individual plan that you just gone out and purchased on your own, not through work, 99% of the time, those are the ones that you have to pay at least a full year, which makes sense because, not really speaking for the insurance company, but it's like you take out the policy, you pay 1 month of $34.99, you get all of your work done, and then the next month you drop it.
Right.
So, and I mean, that kind of makes sense to people, and they think they can kind of work the system, but totally. It's like, so having it for 12 months is not a bad deal because everybody needs to win on that situation. So
again, just to be more specific, I see that those policies of having to have the policy for 12 months or allotted period of time, that's only on the individual side.
Yes.
But I never see that as being the case on the group side. Do you guys?
No, and standardly that's going to be the case simply because, the entire insurance industry is based on risk, right? How do you mitigate risk and still make profit?
Right.
So collect essentially more premiums than you pay out in claims, which is a general rule of thumb, right? Like every company has to make profit to stay afloat. So the difference primarily is going to be, and this is a general rule of thumb, you're going to have to go through far more underwriting on an individual basis just because you're the sole risk.
Right.
When you get those group policies through your employer, you have the risk spread amongst everyone at the group. So that's why you see lower rates with larger groups. Some might have a large 25-year-old population versus a large 65-year-old population, right? And standardly, that risk is going to be higher on an older individual than a lower. So when you get it through that employer, it levels out that risk. So you get better underwriting, probably stronger contracts and things like that, just because they're not just looking at you saying, what is your health history? How likely is it that you go out on claim?
Gotcha. So bringing it back down to the basics, typically whenever we see a dental policy, it's going to cover 100% of preventative. Can you give us a quick definition of what preventative is?
Yeah, so it's going to be basically anything that you go in, like a cleaning, a checkup, an exam, something that they can go in and proactively do.
Okay.
And it's preventative, right? So they go in and say, get ahead of it versus you coming in and saying, I already have 5 cavities.
So you pay your copayment for the year, and then you get all of your teeth cleanings and any preventative exam style things for free, which we would, I think, all at this table encourage everyone to do. Stay on top of that. Make sure that you're getting your x-rays done. And then it goes into 80% coverage, and then it kind of stair steps down. Is that typically what you see in those policies, Bryce?
Yeah. So most standardly, you'll see 100% preventative, 80% basic, 50% major, and then 50% orthodontia.
Okay.
And so basically the coinsurance scales down based on the severity of whatever work you're getting done. And
that means, just for our general listener, that means that 80%, that means insurance company is going to cover 80% of your basic services that are needed. Again, based